The woman who walked away from millions had a secret that would shake Hollywood forever. November 1998. A quiet house in California. The woman who played Florida Evans from Good Times had just died. But when her family opened a wooden chest under her bed, they found something that would change everything we thought we knew about this remarkable woman. Inside were hundreds of letters, secret recordings, and journals that revealed a decades-long battle fought in silence. A battle that shaped how Black women appear on television today. This is the story of Esther Rolle, not just an actress, but a warrior who chose dignity over dollars and changed an entire industry from the shadows. But first, let me tell you about the woman behind the legend. Esther Rolle was born in 1920 in Florida, not into wealth or privilege, but into a family of 18 children. Yes, 18. Her father worked the docks. Her mother somehow managed to feed, clothe, and raise all those kids with nothing but determination. Picture this: a house bursting with children, barely enough food to go around, and a mother who never once complained about the impossible weight she carried. Young Esther watched her mother's grace under pressure every single day. She learned that survival meant more than just getting by. It meant keeping your dignity no matter what the world threw at you. This wasn't just childhood observation. This was training for the battles she would fight decades later in Hollywood boardrooms and television studios. The family grew their own food, made their own clothes, and survived through faith and hard work. Esther often said that growing up in such a large family taught her that everyone had value, everyone had a story, and everyone deserved respect. These weren't just nice words to her. They became the foundation of everything she would later fight for in her career. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. In the 1940s, Esther made a decision that would change her life forever. She left everything familiar behind and moved to New York City. This wasn't some glamorous Hollywood story of a young woman chasing stardom. This was a Black woman in the 1940s, with no connections, no money, and no safety net, deciding to bet everything on herself. She worked as a maid during the day, scrubbing floors for wealthy families who barely saw her as human. But at night she attended classes at the new school, hungry for knowledge and determined to expand her mind. Those early years were brutal. Esther lived in a tiny apartment, survived on rice and beans, and often went days without speaking to anyone who saw her as more than hired help. But she was studying, learning, and slowly building something inside herself that no one could take away. Then she discovered theater. For the first time in her life, she found a place where her voice mattered. Not just her ability to memorize lines, but her perspective, her pain, her truth. When she finally joined the Negro Ensemble Company, Esther had developed something rare in the entertainment industry: an uncompromising sense of self-worth. She refused to audition for roles that mocked Black women or reduced them to stereotypes. This wasn't a luxury for her. It was a necessity. She had seen what happened to people who sold their dignity for a paycheck, and she had made a promise to herself that she would never be one of them. The audition rooms of the 1960s were not kind to a woman like Esther Rolle. She was told she was too dark, too serious, too proud. Casting directors wanted Black women who would smile through degradation, who would make white audiences comfortable with their suffering. But Esther had learned something from her mother's example. You could be strong without being bitter. You could be dignified without being weak. She walked out of auditions, turned down roles, and sometimes went months without work, but she never compromised. And then came 1974, and everything changed. The creators of Good Times approached her about playing Florida Evans, the mother of a struggling family in a Chicago housing project. The role was different from anything on television at the time. A Black woman who was neither a saint nor a stereotype, but a real person with real problems and real strength. Esther saw the potential immediately. This could be the role that showed America what a Black family really looked like. not through the lens of tragedy or comedy, but through the lens of truth. But what happened next would become one of the most important battles in television history. As Good Times gained popularity, something happened that made Esther physically sick. The network began pushing the show in a direction that betrayed everything she believed in. The character of Jade, played by Jimmy Walker, was becoming the focus of the show with his catchphrases and clownish behavior. To Esther, this wasn't just bad television, it was a betrayal of everything she stood for. She began fighting back in ways that most people never saw. She would arrive at script meetings with notes, suggestions, and sometimes complete rewrites. She argued with producers, directors, and network executives, always maintaining her dignity but never backing down. She wanted the show to be about a family that struggled but stayed together, that faced poverty but never lost their humanity. Instead, she watched helplessly as it became centered around a character she felt made Black people look foolish. The tension behind the scenes was incredible. Esther was labeled difficult, ungrateful, and too demanding. She was told that she should be happy to have a job, that she was lucky to be on television at all, but she had learned long ago that being seen was worthless if you weren't being respected. The breaking point came when she realized that nothing was going to change. The network was more interested in ratings than in responsibility, so she did something that shocked everyone. In 1977, at the height of the show's popularity, Esther Rolle walked away from Good Times. She gave up her salary, her fame, and her security, because she refused to be part of something that went against everything she believed in. It was one of the first times a Black woman had stood up to a major television network and said, "No, I won't do this." The aftermath was devastating. Fans were confused and angry. The media painted her as ungrateful and difficult. Her income disappeared overnight, and she found herself blacklisted from other projects. But Esther had learned something from her mother's example. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones you fight alone, and sometimes the most important victories are the ones nobody sees. She spent the next year in relative obscurity, taking small theater roles and wondering if she had made the right choice. The pressure to return to Good Times was enormous. Network executives called, fans wrote letters, and even some of her friends suggested she should come back. But every time she considered it, she would think about the young Black girls who were watching, and she knew she couldn't be part of something that told them their families were jokes. When she finally returned to Good Times in 1978, it was with specific conditions. She demanded more input into storylines, better development for her character, and a commitment to showing the family's strength alongside their struggles. She got some of what she wanted, but the show was already winding down. By 1979, Good Times had ended, and Esther found herself at a crossroads. What happened next revealed the true depth of her character. Instead of becoming bitter or retreating from the public eye, Esther threw herself into something that would remain secret for decades. She started writing letters, hundreds of them, to young Black actresses. She shared her experiences and encouraged them to never compromise their dignity for a role. These letters, discovered after her death, reveal a woman who was determined to make sure the next generation wouldn't have to fight the same battles alone. In one letter found in that wooden chest beneath her bed, she wrote to a young actress, "They will tell you that you are too much, too proud, too serious, too demanding. But remember, my dear, that you are not too much for the right role, the right director, the right story. You are exactly enough, and anyone who can't see that isn't worthy of your gifts." Esther's personal life was equally complex. She had married Oscar Robinson, but the marriage ended in divorce. Friends who knew her well said that she valued her independence too much to play second to anyone. She never had children of her own, though she poured her maternal instincts into her work and her mentoring. She lived simply, gardened obsessively, and read voraciously. Her home was filled with books, African art, and family photos, but nothing flashy or expensive. But here's something that shocked everyone who knew her. What people didn't know was that Esther was incredibly smart with money. Despite her modest lifestyle, she had been quietly investing in stocks and bonds for years. When she died, her estate was worth over $1.7 million, a fortune that surprised everyone who knew her. She had never flaunted her wealth, never used it to buy influence or status. Instead, she had seen it as freedom, the freedom to turn down roles that didn't align with her values, the freedom to speak truth without fear of financial ruin. But perhaps the most revealing discovery came from a cassette tape found in her bedroom drawer. It was a recording she had made in the 1980s, apparently for her own reflection. In it, she said something that would become legendary: "When the world claps, don't lose your rhythm. Remember who you were before they looked at you." These words, simple but profound, captured everything about her approach to fame and success. The tape also revealed her struggles with diabetes, a condition she had kept largely private. She talked about her fear of becoming a burden, her determination to maintain her independence, even as her health declined. She had always been intensely private about her personal struggles, preferring to be known for her work rather than her problem. In her final years, Esther continued to work, taking roles that mattered to her and turning down those that didn't. She appeared in television, movies, and guest spots, always bringing the same dignity and thoughtfulness that had made Florida Evans so memorable. But she was also battling her diabetes, and only a few close friends knew how serious her condition had become. On November 17, 1998, just 9 days after her 78th birthday, Esther Rolle died at home in Culver City. She was alone, but not forgotten. The funeral was held in her hometown of Pompano Beach, with simple flowers and soft gospel music. There were no big headlines, no celebrity tributes, just the quiet dignity that had marked her entire life. But the story didn't end there. As her family went through her belongings, they discovered the full extent of her private battles and her public impact. The letters to young actresses, the journals filled with her thoughts on the industry, the recordings of her personal reflections, all of it painted a picture of a woman who had sacrificed much for her principles but never regretted the choices she made. In 2024, those letters and writings were digitized and made available to researchers. What they revealed was astonishing: a decades-long campaign to change how Black women were portrayed on television, fought largely behind the scenes by one determined woman. The letters showed her working with writers, arguing with producers, and constantly pushing for better representation. She had been fighting for diversity and inclusion long before those terms became popular. One of the most powerful discoveries was a journal entry from 1975. During the height of Good Times' popularity, she wrote, "I am not a star, I am a servant to the truth. If my light helps others find their way, then I have succeeded. If I am forgotten but the path remains, then I have triumphed." These words revealed the heart of a woman who understood that her true victory wouldn't be measured in fame or fortune, but in the doors she opened for others. The journals also revealed her strategy. She knew that fighting openly would get her labeled as difficult and shut out of the industry. So she fought quietly, strategically, building relationships and planting seeds that would grow long after she is gone. Today, Esther Rolle's influence can be seen everywhere. Modern Black actresses like Viola Davis, Angela Bassett, and Regina King have all cited her as an inspiration. Her refusal to compromise her dignity for fame set a precedent that others have followed. Her belief that representation matters, that stories have power, and that sometimes the most important thing you can do is say no. These ideas have become fundamental to how we think about television and film. In 2025, a major television network finally aired a comprehensive tribute to Esther Rolle. It featured interviews with former co-stars, letters from students she mentored, and testimonials from current actors. The consensus was clear: Esther Rolle had made space for everyone who came after her. Not through grand gestures, but through quiet determination. Not through compromise, but through conviction. Her story reminds us that power doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like a quiet woman writing in a journal, planting seeds in her garden, and choosing truth over applause. Sometimes it looks like walking away from everything you've worked for because staying would mean betraying everything you believe in. Sometimes it looks like spending your final years writing letters to young women you've never met, telling them they are enough, they are worthy, and they should never settle for less than they deserve. She took on the weight of an entire community's dignity and carried it with poise. She showed us that representation isn't just about being seen, it's about being seen as you truly are, with all your complexity, strength, and humanity intact. The truth they found in her home wasn't hidden treasure or secret scandal. It was something far more valuable, the written record of a woman who refused to compromise her soul for success, who chose dignity over dollars, and who understood that the most lasting victories are often the quietest ones. Her legacy lives on not in the roles she played, but in the path she carved for others to follow. A path marked not by footsteps but by the courage to stand still when the world asked her to dance to a rhythm that wasn't her own. To everyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or undervalued, Esther Rolle's story is proof that your light doesn't need permission to shine. Your dignity is not negotiable, your truth is not for sale. And sometimes, the most important thing you can do is remember who you were before they looked at you, and never let anyone convince you to be less than that. Subscribe if you believe dignity should never be for sale.